months of hype and build-up, it was time to raise the curtain on a brave new world. A world of technology and dreams. And in that world came frustration and that winning feeling. 7 days ago at Sydney's Amaroo Park saw the Pole Masters, the four-wheel drifters. Next to them, BMW, the Immaculate team, thriving to improve on performance and expertise. We witnessed the performance of a Honda at the hands of brilliant Stephen Richards and Peter Brock, Mr. Popular, reunited. The showroom showdown savours the sights and sounds of a redhead, and for one driver, a lucky escape. It started the championship, round one, here on Sunday Super Tourers.
Guys, can we just ask you quickly who your favourite driver is?
Peter Brock, mate. Yeah, mate, go for Brocky.
Mark Adderton, of course.
Paul Morris to win, mate.
Give Brocky a go.
Greg Murphy.
Yeah. Brad Jones, mate, four-wheel drive Audi.
Probably Steve Richards, I reckon.
I'd have to say Greg Murphy. Mr. Adderton, I think. Peter Brock. We came to see Paul Morris.
Peter Brock!
Volvo 850, racing a new car, and its master, Peter Brock, takes you on board for a flying lap around Amaroo.
Here we go, Amaroo Park. A tight little track, one I like very much actually. Great in the Volvo. Track's a little bit dead as we're going out here at the moment, but quite enjoyable. Over the crest here. Normally I'll get a flying lap, but this is a fourth gear corner. This downhill, this loop out here, nice and over the power, in tight. At the apex, absolutely flat in fourth, up to fifth. Oh, fifth down here, cut, lift off, a little bit damp, over the power. Oh, three tight little corners, one is the third gear, out wide, deep, power on, straight up again. I'll just hit fifth gear momentarily down to the stop go. I'll take this in second gear. Very, very tight. Fair bit of wheel spin coming out. Up to third gear, lift off onto the straight nice and gently. Yeah, up the straight. Fourth, fifth gear. In tight. Hit the right left side. Touch the brakes, back to fifth. Power on. Just to keep the car balanced. Back to fourth again for the loop. In tight. Let it drift wide. The late apex. Over the power. Fifth gear. Drying out a little bit now. I'll use sixth gear down here next time, but it's going very well. Back to third gear. This is a passing position coming up here. With a soft go, you can go down the inside pretty easily. And outbrake another one. Get a nice line up, coming out here, and then come onto the main straight properly is another way of getting a really good slipstream up the main straight here. Keep it inside, and then if I was passing someone there, I'd go up from the outside here, and perhaps tuck out a little bit wide, and then go around a little bit wide and down the inside, break it very late down the inside for the loop, and just, there's another area which is pretty good to pass around here too. And that's coming down the main straight, down the back straight, getting it out wide, and getting a very, very good run out of this corner, getting a power on there, then coming down on the left-hand side of the track, and putting up down the inside this little left-hander. So there's three very good passing places around Amaroo. The track that suits these little super tours right down to the ground.
Good afternoon, Australia, and welcome to Amaroo Park for round one of the BOC Gas's Super Touring Championship for 2-litre cars. This is the first round of an 8-round series and the first national race meeting at Amaroo Park in some 2.5 years. Neil Crompton, it's the third year of Super Touring Championship racing here in Australia and a series which is growing all the time.
That's right, Craig. Good to be here, good to see you, and looking forward to the action today. You've got a variety of different types of cars in this type of touring car racing. You've got the all-wheel drive Audis, you've got the rear-wheel drive cars, for example, like the Diet Coke BMWs. You've also got the front-wheel drive vehicles like the Honda and the Volvo. So there's a variety of different types of cars, each with different strengths and weaknesses, and we'll be watching that with great interest today to see who comes out on top.
It's a 14-car field for race 1, a 31-lap event, and the grid set by the first of the qualifying sessions yesterday. Pole position went to Greg Murphy in the Audi, teammate Brad Jones alongside, then Paul Morris in the Diet Coke BMW, Jeffrey Brabham alongside him, Stephen Richards, Peter Brock in the Volvo, Jeff Full first of the Peugeots, Cameron McLean in a BMW, Mark Adderton in a Peugeot, Charlie O'Brien, Privateer, another BMW, Justin Matthews BMW, Paul Piggott, Hyundai Lantra, David Salas in a BMW, and Bob Holden's BMW round out the field.
Round 1, race 1, the BOC Gases Australian Super Touring Championship. Murphy gets a very good jump away from the line. Morris goes with him up on the outside. Brad Jones drops back into third, but Morris squeezes up on the left-hand side and grabs the inside line for the left-hander over the top of the hill. And that was nice driving by Paul Morris. Seized an opportunity. Oh, Jeff Brabham locks a brake. Hope he hasn't flat-spotted a tyre.
Great start from Paul Morris, last year's champion, from third on the grid, and he's the man to watch. Can the Audi four-wheel drives hold out these beaut little rear-wheel drive BMWs? So it's Morris leading so far. From Murphy, Jones, great shot from Stephen Richards in the beautiful Valvoline Honda.
Oh, down the inside, under brakes. In the left-hander there, just catches Brock unaware, left a little bit of room. So Richards and Brock side by side as they head down to the stop corner. They're all chasing Paul Morris. Car number 1. Greg Murphy in second place. This is Brad Jones as we go on board with the Audi. Look at Murphy working away at the back of the BMW. Remember that the Audi is all-wheel drive, the BMW is rear-wheel drive. All of these cars 2 litres in capacity as we go on board now with Jeff Brabham. Sequential gearbox changes back over the top of the hill, back down another gear into the right-hander at the Dunlop loop. Listen to him playing with the throttle, just trying to balance the car. There's his teammate Paul Morris. So it's Morris, Murphy, Jones and Brabham.
Morris, as he goes down round the back of the track, hard on brakes here. This is a very, very tricky left-hander. Murphy closes right up behind him. Jones now too. A close little freight train deal.
Yeah, watching Greg now down the outside. The Audi, known for its strong braking performance, rounds him up. Will he run out of room? He's taken some room off him and goes round the outside. Yeah, that was good stuff. Onto the straight. See the shift light on the top of the dash. When you see the red light come on, when both lights come on, he pulls a gear. 8,500 RPM is the rev limit in this category.
Very fast over the top of the hill. Better than 200 Ks, again, as they go down around the back of the circuit. Very tricky, this part. Fighting understeer in the car, fighting oversteer. And again, from Bradley Jones, you're seeing Paul Morris now in the Diet Coke BMW, lightly on the brakes as they head down to this very hard left-hander.
Problem there with one of the Foxtel Audis, and it looks like Jeff Full. So Jeffrey not having a good start to the championship. This is Brad Jones, car number 3, the left-hand side of screen. Makes a big run down the outside of Paul Morris. He saw his teammate Greg Murphy pull this off only a couple of laps ago.
How close was that?
He actually heard the car yelping under brakes then, and it was a little unsettled. So Murphy, meanwhile, disappears off into the distance. There's second and third. Jones almost got gobbled up that time by Jeff Brabham in that manoeuvre because he bogged the Audi down on the other side. Sparks from underneath Jones' car as we go on board once again with Jeff Brabham.
Cars get very light over the top of the hill there, Neil, don't they?
Yeah, very much so. This is a very interesting circuit for the way in which cars perform around here. This is Peter Brock in the 05 Volvo 850.
Yes, Brock, a new addition to the Super Touring Championship this year in a car that was raced last year in the British Touring Car Championship by Ricard Riddell. Was put on pole 13 times in the British Touring Car Championship last year, and this is Peter Brock's first real serious attempt at Super Touring racing. Car is crewed by George Shepherd, and a great in-shot car too from the Volvo as he comes up to lap one of the slower BMWs.
It's a 5-cylinder car, unusual in its engine configuration. You can see off in the distance there is Stephen Richards in the Honda Accord. There's Jeff Brabham, 4th position at the moment, car number 83. Favourite number for Jeffrey, used that number to win multiple IMSA sports car championships in the United States driving for Nissan.
Yes, won Le Mans in 1993. And a very underrated driver. Has been pretty well Paul Morris's match right throughout the series last year, even though Morris claimed the win. And this is Stephen Richards' first race in this car, a Honda Accord, which was raced again in the British Touring Car Championship last year by David Leslie.
That's the leader. Second place there, Paul Morris. Third place, Brad Jones. No change at the top of the order. Then a distant 4th at the moment is Jeff Brabham. You notice that Paul really throws the BMW around, and that's working the rear tyres pretty hard at the moment. The last lap over the top of the hill and through the loop, the car was getting very sideways.
Jones now measurably closer to the back of Morris's BMW. So will it be an Audi 1-2? Four-wheel drive around Amaroo Park. It's a tight circuit.
No, notice the little digital readout back to 5th gear over the top of the hill. Now he'll go down another notch to 4th gear as he turns right into the Dunlop loop. So a little digital readout just to the right-hand side of the driver display. And these cars have got a sequential gearbox, which means that, well, basically you just pull back on the lever. It's not a traditional H pattern as we know in most manuals. Paul Morris protecting his corner there, moving to the left-hand side of the road as he goes through that left-hander, approaching now the stop corner, the slowest corner on the track, protects his line once again, but Jones a wake up down the outside. 2 cars wide through the right-hander, gets the power to the ground, and I think he's done it.
Oh,
yeah, squeezes up on the outside.
Yes, he started working the back of Morris 2 or 3 corners back and finally nailed him again onto that short straight coming up towards the pits at Amaroo Park. So can Morris now come back, or is four-wheel drive around Amaroo Park, because it's such a tight, twisty circuit, just too much the measure for these 2-wheel drive BMWs?
Lead 2 cars on Dunlop tyres. Third and fourth with this man here, Jeff Brabham, and his teammate Paul Morris running for Yokohama. You see Paul using the ripple strip on the inside and again using the ripple strip on the outside. He's squeezing every last ounce of performance out of the BMW. A lot of bounce in the front of the car through the left-hander there at Honda corner.
They're obviously working the cars really hard, Neil. You can see that. Morris and Brabham both pushing these cars very hard. Brabham actually in fastest in qualifying Friday, but Morris had the better car set up for qualifying Saturday, and you can see now, I think, has also the measure of his teammate Brabham. But this is a great performance from Stephen Richards. First of the privateers, leading Peter Brock, and at this stage running 5th outright.
Young Stephen doing 2 senior championships this year in the Super Tourer Series and also doing the Shell Series and the 5-litre Holden. But this Honda Accord, run last year in the British Series, backed by Valvoline, his long-time sponsor. Stephen did so well in Formula Ford, has done so well in Oscar racing, doing a tremendous job as a privateer in the 5-litre Series and doing an equally brilliant job in this series, right in behind the factory cars. As we go on board with Brad Jones, who is now right up behind his teammate Greg Murphy. See how effectively the Audi puts its power to the road as he came out of that right hand of the stop corner. There's no sign of wheel spin. The tail of the car is stable.
Great battle here too between Cameron McLean and Charlie O'Brien for the BMW Privateers Cup. O'Brien has a look down the inside of McLean. Can't quite do it. McLean, the current Australian sports sedan champion. This is a car which was last year driven by Stephen Ellery in this championship, and the year before won the series for Tony Longhurst, so it's got plenty of pedigree and history. O'Brien driving a 93 spec BMW owned by a New Zealand driver called Miles Pope, so a car that's down on specs of this car and also the Diet Coke BMWs, but Charlie doing a great job to stay with them.
So as Brad Jones applies pressure to his teammate Greg Murphy, we're going to take a break and be back with more of the action from Amaroo Park in just a moment.
Fascinating rhythm has got me on the move. Fascinating rhythm lock me on the groove.
So, Murphy still dominates this race from teammate Brad Jones. Has a look down the inside of Greg Murphy. These 2 Audi 4-wheel drives, and yes, has taken his teammate. As we see Charlie O'Brien battling out for the Privateers Cup, also taking Cameron McLean's BMW.
Paul Morris in 3rd position in the Diet Coke BMW. Again, just have a look at that little reading on the dashboard there as he changes from 5th to 6th and heads up over the top of the hill behind the 2 Audis. Brad Jones leading from Greg Murphy. Jones car number 3, Murphy car number 4, and if you're having trouble picking them, Jones is the one with the fluoro mirrors.
Peter Brock now through the traffic. Down the inside of one of the cars he's lapping. Comes up behind one of the BMWs. Moves over to give Peter Brock plenty of room in this beautiful 850 Volvo. It's a very pretty car to watch on the track, Neil.
Yes, it is. It's an unusual car in its configuration. It's a 5-cylinder 2-litre engine. It's front-wheel drive, so it's very different to the sort of car that we've seen Peter driving for many years in Australia. And slowly but surely this team is getting its act together. They're doing some extensive testing in Queensland in the coming weeks. And this is the Peugeot, driven by Mark Adderton, and of course Jeff Full went off earlier in his car. I don't quite know what the problem was with Jeff's car.
Fuel problems, I think, with Jeff's car, and a shot there too of the Hyundai Lantra, which is driven by Paul Pickett and Justin Matthews in the Faber-Castell BMW. So these two again are battling out for privateer honours in the Network 10 Privateers Cup. This was a car that was driven last year by Steve Hardman, and it's Pickett's first race in the car.
Stephen Richards, meanwhile, downshifting, looking to go around the outside of Paul Pickett in the Hyundai.
Not quite this time. We'll have a look on the inside as he says, I'll take the outside run.
Notice that Stephen's sitting back in the car. There's an extension to, and he's not happy about the time that was lost there. There's been an extension put in the steering column. The instrument panel's been moved back. Indeed, his weight has shifted back in the car to try and get a better balance in the vehicle.
Of course, with a front-wheel drive car, Neil, I mean, you've got so much weight up the front with the engine and gearbox. I mean, the further they can get the weight back, the better balance the car comes from a handling point of view.
That's correct.
Bradley Jones now.
Left-hand drive Audi A4, which I think for Amaroo Park is an advantage. When we ran the BMWs here back in 1988, it gave you the opportunity to be able to drive right up to the concrete walls and up to the Armco railing, and I think it enables you to position the car just a little bit more accurately around this circuit. So Jones now coming up towards the back of Mark Adderton in the Foxtel Peugeot. You see the Peugeot just picking up the ripple strip on the inside, then just upsets the car. The majority of these super touring cars tend to be sprung and shock calibrated very stiffly, because particularly in the UK where the tracks are very, very smooth, the cars need to run in that configuration to be fast. And that's why you'll see a lot of these cars, when you look at them, working pretty hard on what few bumps there are around Amaroo Park. It's one of the smoother circuits in the Australian racing scene. Cars typically very stiff. There's fourth gear, fifth gear heading up the straight, past the control tower, past our commentary point, up to sixth gear, to the top of the hill now, around the outside of Salis and the BMW, back to fifth, over the top of the hill, balancing the car right on the limits of its adhesion. Now through the right-hander at Dunlop in fourth gear, balancing on the throttle, bit of understeer, bit of oversteer. Car heads out towards the ripple strip, grabs fifth, closing up on the back of Adderton now, nudging about 190 k's through the right-hander. Down to the left-hander at Honda Corner. Back to third gear there as we go back to the leaders. And
how's
Murphy
that?
tags Jones. Well,
big run down the inside of Jones there by teammate Greg Murphy. Actually clouted the back of his teammate's car.
Well, that's not going to be welcomed in the pit area, I can tell you, because
and this has allowed Morris to come right up behind too. So look at Paul Morris in the BMW. 1, 2 and 3 in this race.
I was going to say that team manager Kim Jones is not going to be happy about that, because the last thing you need is your two team cars running into each other. So Murphy and Jones arguing over first and second, and that's given Paul Morris a new lease on life. As we take a look at a replay now, see Bradley turns in. Greg was committed, couldn't go anywhere, tags the right to left rear of the Audi. A little bit of front bumper damage on car number 4, but I think he's got away with it. Let's go on board. You see just what happens there as Bradley takes his set.
Pushed him offline.
Knocked out to the right-hand side over the ripple strip, and gathered it back up in the nick of time, because that BMW was right there.
Well, I guess it proves one thing, Neil, there's no team orders in this team. Both battling for first and second, but Morris has closed right up again onto the back of Jones's car now. Can he hang in there as we get towards the closing stages of this race?
Notice that there's a digital readout of all the instrumentation on the dashboard of the BMW. It's what's called a PI Research Intelligent Instrumentation System, where all of the information that the car gathers is logged in that device and can then be downloaded after the race, and all of the information can be assessed to look for maybe more performance in the car, or make a change, or perhaps change your driving style, or whatever the case may be. But you name it, engine temperatures and pressures and all sorts of performance data is all logged.
You can see the damage to the front of Greg Murphy's car there as they entered the loop too. Yes, the front of the spoiler, the bumper's been pushed up, so it was a fairly severe little hit. Lucky not to take them both out. Again, as we ride with Jeff Brabham, the Dyed Coat BMW. Can't quite match the pace of teammate Morris.
Hard on the brakes, down to third gear. Making the run now to the stop corner. Jeff in fourth position. See how the car has that stiff appearance, really not liking the bump across the apex of that right-hander at the stop corner as they head back down what little of there is of the main straight at Amaroo Park.
Again, riding with Peter Brock in the Volvo 850, its first race appearance in the Super Touring Championship here in Australia. Very quick car last year, on pole position for 13 of the races in the British Touring Car Championship. And no doubt George Shepherd and the crew looking forward to this car becoming more and more competitive over the next round or two.
On board with Brad Jones, closing right up onto the back of Greg Murphy now as they head down towards the stop corner. And these guys continue to argue over first and second. Now Jones down the inside, squeezing every last bit of braking performance. I think he's done it.
That's a great move from Brad Jones. Now, side by side as they come up to lap a slower car, Bob Holden in the BMW moves across to let them through as they come up one more time across the start-finish line.
It's certainly on between these guys at the moment. They are arguing big time over first and second. We're with Paul Morris over the top of the hill. Television tends not to do justice to how much rise and fall there is in the road here, Craig. It really drops away from underneath you as you go through that right-hander at the Dunlop Loop.
There's nothing between these two cars. They're lapping within tenths of seconds and in some cases hundreds of seconds of one another, and it's been probably no more than 0.1, 0.2, sometimes 0.3 of a second between first and second for this entire race. So they're very evenly matched in both, I would imagine, car setup and specifications, near as much as driver ability.
Interesting to look at lap times. They're sort of getting around at the moment in the low 51s or thereabouts, remembering that the cars are at their fastest when the tyres are green. In other words, when they're first put on the car in the first couple of laps for qualifying. Now, yesterday they qualified for this race in times of 50.3 seconds. In fact, both the Audis were separated by virtually no time at all. But they've now dropped about 0.7 of a second, which is what you would expect in terms of tyre performance drop-off at this stage of the race. We're on board with Jeff Brabham here, tagging his teammate Paul Morris. So Audi 1-2, BMW 3-4. This time the Audi guys have got a better understanding. They're keeping an eye on each other, and no touching going down through the left-hander as they head to the stop corner.
On their second last lap now, they'll get the last lap ball this time around, so it's still Jones in car number 3, leading from his teammate Greg Murphy in car number 4. Audi's 1-2. Very dominant, these two four-wheel drive cars this weekend, Neil.
Yeah, they've got the cars balanced nicely around here. They were a little slower in qualifying than they were on Thursday when Bradley did a 50.1, which was very quick, and a time virtually matched again by Greg. But the cars are working really nicely, and you can see that at the moment they have got the advantage over the BMWs, although it's only a small one at this stage, but it's enough to be comfortable. And this has been a very, very good opening round for them. Maximum points are going to be on the board after this one. There's the gap back to third and fourth. As I said, not a huge amount, but enough to be comfortable. And these guys can build on from here. Remember, last year the Audi was third in the championship with Bradley at the helm. And they're looking to try and break that BMW domination of this category in recent years.
So 2 corners to go, and it's Jones, Murphy. Can Murphy do anything about it on the last lap? Don't think so. Slots in behind Jones as they take the run to the flag. Looks for the inside run, but no. Bradley Jones is going to win race 1, round 1 of the BOC Gases Super Touring Championship. From Paul Morris in the Diet Coke BMW, Jeffrey Brabham and Stephen Richards, first of the privateers in the Honda Accord.
So let's check the scoreboard after the first race, and Brad Jones and his teammate Greg Murphy have cleaned up for Audi. Then in third place we had Paul Morris and Jeff Brabham, BMW teammates. Stephen Richards was the next man through, the first of the privateers in 5th, followed by Peter Brock. Charlie O'Brien was in 7th place, and Mark Adderton rounds out the top 8. And we're back with more in just a moment.
I don't really have a favourite sports person, but I respect everyone who's got to the top level of their required sport. The competition's so tough, everyone will be incredibly hard to beat. Enjoy listening to music and just relaxing, doing nothing. I'm involved in my own separate team, and Dad really enjoys what I'm doing, and I enjoy what he's doing. We both have a respect for each other. Being involved in motorsport, I'd have to say Michael Schumacher. He is at the optimum level. He's got a new challenge ahead of him with the Ferrari Formula 1 team. But like I said, anyone at the top of their profession is incredibly admirable. But I'd bet my life on a roll of the dice for you.
They're on the warm-up lap now for race 2 of round 1 of the BOC Gases Super Touring Championship, and we've seen Audi dominate race 1. Neil Crompton, will that be the same for race 2?
Well, if the first race is anything to go by, Craig, you would think so. Now, yesterday, the qualifying for this race was done in wet conditions, and that tended to change things a little, although Audis continued to dominate, as you would expect with four-wheel drive. Greg Murphy, Brad Jones will share the front row of the grid with Murphy on pole position. It's a BMW argument on row 2 with Paul Morris and Jeff Brabham. Row 3, Peter Brock and Charlie O'Brien. Row number 4 is Stephen Richards and Cameron McLean. Row number 5, Mark Adderton in the Peugeot and Matthews in the BMW. Row 6 is Hills in the Ford Sierra with Bob Holden, then Paul Salas in the BMW, and Jeffrey Full will round out the grid. In the starters' hands.
Set for a start, 31 laps. Engines almost on the rev limiters. And they're away, and it's a pretty even start between both Murphy and Jones. And again, Morris looking for that inside run, but no, boxed in behind Greg Murphy.
Well, I would have thought that Murphy was creeping a bit at the start there, but obviously there's been no indication in front of us that there's a problem with him doing that. So the field continues through over the top of the hill for the first time. The Audis are 1 and 2, and Paul Morris trying to poke and probe and find a way through. Oh, and tags the back of Brad Jones. Morris is aggressive.
Gave him a big serve too. You can see that Morris was boxed in at the start. The two Audis made sure that the little BMW didn't get the jump up the straight this time. As we're riding with Peter Brock in the Volvo 850, tagging Jeffrey Brabham.
He's made a better start this time. Brock out on the racing line. Jeff Brabham just covers a little bit, moves to the inside. That's quite legal. You can do that in motor racing. Provided you're not seen to be weaving in front of the other guy, you can take road off him. There's Stephen Richards in the beautiful little Honda Accord. Lovely preparation in that car. End of lap number 1, and it's Audi 1 and 2 with Paul Morris right in behind Brad Jones. Morris carries number 1. He's the reigning Super Touring champion in Australia.
Made some changes too to this car and also Jeffrey Brabham's car following the first race. They found that the left-hand rear tyre was going off, so they've changed the rear suspension configuration in an effort to make these cars a little quicker for this race.
You could see the way that Paul's car was behaving in the first event, that it had a lot of oversteer in it, so he obviously was cooking up that left rear tyre.
Changes to Peter Brock's car too. George Seppard wanted to take some of the understeer out of the car, so they changed the ride height. But Jones now hard on the brakes.
That's a tremendous shot. You could see in the right-hand rear vision mirror the BMW lurking in third position. We're on board with Bradley Jones. That's Greg Murphy off in the distance. A decent sort of a gap too. There's Morris in third place. Understeer, Craig, is the big enemy of front-wheel drive super touring cars, and so you'll hear a lot about that this year. I know that Stephen Richards was very happy with the performance of his car on green Yokohama tyres when they were new, but he was concerned that as the tyres got older, he was going to get more and more of this understeer. Now, Stephen is right in behind Peter Brock at the moment at the Dunlop Loop, and they are separated by a cigarette paper as they go down towards the fast right-hander.
So let's watch Richards. This is a great effort. Battling for the Network 10 Privateers Cup. Has a look down the outside of Peter Brock. Can't quite do it. Will he run right around the outside? Yes, I think Richards is working the side of Brock's car and has got the run down on the inside.
Yep, he's done it. Now, notice he had to hesitate on the throttle a little bit coming out of the left-hander, but he still managed to get through there. Normally you can't do that. Once you're off the throttle, you're shot, but he had the cornering speed.
Yes, and Brock wasn't going to move over. Give him the line, said, come on, young Stephen, you're going to have to work for this. So and he did it.
These two cars, Craig, are front-wheel drive. This is the Honda Accord, and the car behind Peter Brock's Volvo 850 is also front-wheel drive. So different style of configuration in the chassis to the cars in front. This car here is all-wheel drive. All four corners of the car are applying traction to the road, and the two cars behind the BMWs are rear-wheel drive. And as I said at the top of the show, each of them with their own characteristics. They have their own attributes, strengths and weaknesses in different areas. This track very obviously suiting the Audis. It may not be the case everywhere we go.
So that's Greg Murphy, car number 4 for Oryx Audi Sport. A new car to Australia this year, same with teammate Brad Jones's car. They raced in the Italian Championship last year, finished 1-2. But this is their first race in Australia in this Super Touring Championship. And the two cars behind too, the two BMWs are new to the championship this year, being built for the World Cup last year. Riding with Brad Jones, again through the top end of the circuit. I think he's closing a little bit too on the back of Murphy. A lot of sparks there as they ride over the curbs. What would that be, Neil?
Well, it'll maybe be a drop link on a roll bar or something like that, perhaps the bottom of one of the coolers. The cars have got a very, very low ride height, and you can't really afford to bounce over too many things. You start knocking the underside of the car around, and the ripple strip on that part of the course is very high, and Bradley would have noted as he went through there that that probably wasn't ideal and may even have cost him a bit of time. Stephen Richards here, we're on board with him as he comes out of stop corner, second, third and fourth onto the straight.
Car that's having its first race in Australia was brought out by Gary Rogers Motorsport for Stephen to drive. Having a very busy year in Group 8 touring cars and Super Touring cars. And a very impressive performance, Neil, for this car's first race in Australia from this young boy.
Absolutely. Stephen, I was having a good chat to him yesterday about the car. He really enjoys driving it. He's learning how to set it up. He's not 100% happy with it at the moment, as I said before. Got a little bit of understeer developing in this car as he goes. There's Bob Holden and the older BMW. Leaders coming up onto the back of him. But he'll get there, no question. Jeffrey Full coming through from the rear of grid in the Foxtel Peugeot.
Yes, had a problem, and a spin there from teammate Mark Adderton in car 96, the second of the Foxtel Peugeots.
Well, it looks like it was game, set and match. There wasn't a lot of urgency to get it going. We're back with Paul Morris coming on to the front straight past the Coca-Cola Tower. 5th to 6th, that's top gear in these cars. Sequential gearbox. Pushes forward now to go to 5th gear. Car's just sliding over the top of the hill, back to 4th now for the right-hander, the Dunlop loop we call it. There's Mark Adderton on the left, balancing the car very carefully right onto the top of the ripple strip. That's the one that we saw Bradley bringing all the sparks up on before. Peter Brock
in the Volvo. Again, this car, a very quick car last year, still short on development time for Australian racetracks, but Brock very happy in driving the car.
On Michelin tyres, and we've basically got 3 brands, major brands of tyres contesting this championship. There's Dunlop, there's Yokohama and there's Michelin. This car is on Michelin as we go back to our race leaders. Audi's 3 and 4. It's Murphy and Jones. Cameron McLean here in the BMW for Greenfield Mowers. Fixed that front left guard damage from the earlier heat.
Yes, and you can see again that BMW skipping through the corner there because the suspension is set up so hard. And Jeffrey Full chasing him hard in the Foxtel Peugeot. Car driven last year by Patrick Watts in the British Touring Car Championship and driven at the Indy Gold Coast meet by motorcycle racer Kevin Schwantz.
Kevin did a great job in the car. Oh, look at this. How tight is that? Jeffrey Full trying to squeeze through. He's got the hand off the wheel. He's not happy. He's sending a little message to Cameron, and he's going to have to gather it all back up now and try and regain those 50 or so metres that he's lost to the BMW.
These two battling for the Privateers Cup. Very serious, even though they're not outright contenders at this stage. This is a very serious part of this championship. And McLean, who's been very competitive in Queensland over the past few years, doing a great job too in the car that Stephen Ellery drove last year.
Here's a replay. Jeff didn't really get up alongside enough and he had to take to the right-hand side of the road. In fact, he got into the dirt to try and do it. When you straddle the ripple strip, it's very easy to damage the car as well. You really need to get up to about the B pillar or more before you can really claim the corner, but you've got to have a go. That's what this game's all about.
Now Jones having a look down the inside of Greg Murphy.
This is Brad Jones. We're on board with him as they come up onto the main straight area, and it's about 4 or 5 car lengths first to second. We've still got BMWs with Paul Morris and Jeff Brabham third and fourth.
Jones won the first race. Murphy leading the second race, but Jones measurably now closer to the back of Murphy's car. Again, they go through the loop at the top end of the circuit. A very tight, twisty bit of track, chasing maximum adhesion. And I would imagine, Neil, this is where the four-wheel drive cars are probably stronger around this part of the circuit than the two BMW rear-wheel drive cars.
One of the great attributes that the Audi has got, as we look at Brad Jones trying to probe a way through on the inside of his teammate Greg Murphy, is that it evenly dispenses its load across all four corners of the car as Jones comes down the outside now on the brakes. Greg's got the inside, Bradley on the outside going the long way around. Now they're side by side as they go up to the right-hander onto the straight, and still Murphy's lurking. You can see him in the background, but I think Jones has done the job. Round the outside of Hills in the Sierra, the blue flag being shown there to the slower competitor that another car is coming by. So it's Jones from Murphy.
Great effort by Brad Jones. Tremendous effort to do it around the outside like that.
I was going to say that what the great advantage of the Audi with the four-wheel drive system is that it tends not to chew up any one particular tyre, and that's a particular advantage later in the race.
Again, lapping slower cars, coming up on the back of Bob Holden's BMW. Jones shoots to the outside, Murphy follows him.
Notice the way the inside rear tyre comes off the deck as they come into that left-hander. The cars, as I mentioned before, are quite stiffly sprung. Quite a reasonable bit of anti-roll bar in the car to be able to pick the inside rear wheel up like that.
And while the two Audis are running 1-2, Neil, Paul Morris in the BMW is not that far behind. You're talking about probably 5-6 tenths of a second.
Well, I said in the first race, Craig, that it was a comfortable margin, and that's about all it is. If you make a hiccup, as we go with Peter Brock coming into the pit area. So Brock's got a problem in the Volvo.
So, George Shepherd, who runs this team, will no doubt be anxious to talk to Peter and find out what the problem is. They're taking what appears to be the wheel off the
they've got a problem.
Front of the car. Smoke there.
Right-hand corner. Very often when the cars stop, Craig, you'll see a lot of smoke come out of the wheel area because the pads tend to cook up on the hot disc. But I think there's some sort of a bigger problem here at the moment because there's not a lot of urgency. The body language from George and the crew suggests that Peter can have an early mark.
So we're back with the action too, and it's Stephen Richards now who's closing right up behind Jeffrey Brabham in the BMW.
Now, I mentioned before about late in the race tyre performance. You notice the back of the BMW then was very, very loose as Stephen Richards applies enormous pressure to the Diet Coke BMW.
And this is the battle for fourth place. You're watching fourth and fifth now as Brabham brakes early, locks a brake up.
I tell you, those BMs do not look nice across the apex of that stop corner. They jump and buck and weave. So, Stephen Richards in fifth, chasing Jeffrey Brabham in fourth. Up the road a bit, we've got Paul Morris, and the two Audis still in control at the front of the field.
Richards, a very mature driver, considering he's so young. Done a season in Formula Fords, performed very, very well. 23
years of age. Got a lot of respect for Stephen. A cool customer, understands his motor cars, does a lot of the work on them himself.
And has a car's own. I was going to say he has a pretty good coach too.
Yeah, Jim knows what he's doing. The car's owned by Gary Rogers, a businessman, a car dealer from Melbourne, and a very competent motor racer himself. So Stephen now right in behind Jeff, and Jeff's been locking up brakes, trying to hold him at bay. Protects, goes for the inside. And he tries to crisscross him if he can get the power to the ground, but there's a lot of wheel spin there, and that little front-wheel drive Honda doesn't really want to give the traction that Stephen's looking for right at the moment. He's a bit quicker coming onto the straight. Can he make a move up the top of the hill? He pulls to the right. You can't really do it up here, though, because you end up in the dirt and the marbles on the outside, so you'll have to tuck in and toe the line. Notice there on the right-hand side, it's a very dirty line.
Switches to the outside again to try and come back on the inside, and does it.
He's done it this time.
Nice move on the inside of Jeff Brabham. So Stephen Richards now moves up to fourth place.
You notice that he didn't cut him any racing room either. Stephen, once he got him round the throat, just took him all the way out to the outside of the road, and basically the deal there was that, hey, Jeff, back off. And that's exactly what happened.
Richards looking good for the Privateers Cup. Let's see what happened to Peter Brock.
Well, I think it's done a front wheel bearing seal because I had a smelling of smoke from pretty well the beginning of the race, and it didn't feel right. And I pressed on for a while thinking, oh, I'll see how it settles down after a few laps. But I called up George and said, George, where's the smoke coming from? He said, there's a tyre hitting the front bumper bar. And then I said, oh, I'm going to come in and just check the wheel nuts or something like that. And as I come in, he said, no, it's done a seal. So
back to the leaders, and Brad Jones leads from Greg Murphy 3 and 4 in the Audi A4s for Oryx.
Now this is a great battle, and we'll be back shortly to see how it unfolds here at Amaroo Park.
And this battle continues.
Bradley Jones, well experienced, 5-time Australian Auscar champion, Australian NASCAR champion, former Australian production car champion, and Greg Murphy from New Zealand, Neil, a quick little steerer, 22 years of age, big future for this boy.
Very much so. He's done a lot of driving in single-seater racing cars in Formula Brabham and also in Formula Atlantic cars. He recently took a trip to Daytona and just also came back from qualifying for Le Mans. He's going to Le Mans, driving a Porsche for a New Zealand team there in June. So he is a very talented young racer and following very closely in the footsteps of one of the more successful Australian drivers, Brad Jones.
Jones often probably doesn't get the credit he deserves for some of the success he's had over the years, Neil, but no doubt you'll be happy to have him in your team at Bathurst again this year.
That's right. Brad drove with us last year and finished in 5th placing at the Tooheys 1000, and he's probably going to come back and join us again later this year. Drove for us at Surfers Paradise, and he's a very competent driver who's very quick and understands how to look after the machinery and doesn't get himself in too much trouble. I think that's very important. Very rarely do you see guys of this calibre tearing their cars apart, although these two blokes managed to get stuck into it in the first race. But Bradley's been very successful in Auscar and NASCAR and been building his credentials in super touring racing. Last year's Audi wasn't quite on the pace by comparison to the BMWs. This new car, not only is it a very good-looking car, but it works very effectively, and these two guys are driving them well.
These two cars different from last year's, as we see Murphy again now running down the inside of Brad Jones to take the lead in the BOC Gases Super Touring Championship. Moves across to cover his line as we ride with Paul Morris.
Paul's getting a little bit closer. While the two lead guys are carving each other up, that's actually costing them time because they're not taking the absolute perfect racing line around the circuit, and that means that you knock a bit of time off, and it doesn't take very much of that stuff to allow the other bloke to jump up. And you can see here that Paul Morris has closed the gap substantially, even from when they were down the bottom of the circuit, because these two lead guys were crisscrossing coming onto the straight. You've only got to lose, hey, half a second in super touring racing or any type of motor racing, and that translates to a lot of metres on the road. And Paul is seizing the opportunity now as he closes up into the left-hander Honda corner.
Riding with Jones, second, teammate Murphy, and shot of Paul Morris. It appears though Morris is working the car a lot harder now. You can see there the front brakes locked up, the car's hitting the curbs. He looks like he's working real hard to maintain, to stay in touch with the two lead Audis, who seem to be doing nice and easily. Just looking at the lap charts, Neil, looks as though Jeff Full of the Foxtel Peugeot has gone missing. We'll go down to the pits and find out what's happened.
We're pretty happy with the car. We had problems in the first race. Got the car out, we had fresh tyres, came off the back of the grid, got up to 8th place, was making good headway. It was obviously quicker than the car in front, but I think we might Chris and Cameron McLean, the John Bower Super Touring cars. The guy's weaving all over the road. Lucky I got a camera in the car. I'll be protesting to the officials. He put me off up the top here at Victor Pave, and I'm not real happy. It's broken our steering and we're out of the race.
Oh, fighting words from Jeff Full. Not happy at all with Cameron McLean's behaviour. I'll let Tim Schenken sort that out. Meanwhile, let's go back to the leaders. We've got the Audis 1 and 2, and it's Greg Murphy in control at the moment. Brad Jones in behind, and still that margin back to Paul Morris. So
nothing between these two. Look, Jones now has a run down the inside of Murphy, and can he do it coming onto the straight? Jones has got the run, I think, and yes, pulls ahead again to take the lead in the second race of round 1 of the BOC Gases Super Touring Championship. Great move from Brad.
I noticed Greg just decided then to back off as he got to the top of the hill, because that would have put Bradley one out and one wide over the top in all the dirt and marbles. So he just gave him a little bit of room, and again, because these two guys are playing games, they're mucking around, starting to carve each other up, then they're losing time, and Paul Morris gets closer.
Morris now down to within 0.3 of a second of these two Audis. 1, 2 and 3. Audi, and BMW.
Notice a little misfire in the background there. Somebody just getting to the rev limiter. These cars rev limited to 8,500 RPM. It's the same across all of the brands, regardless of engine configuration.
And one would imagine too, Neil, as we look at the last lap board, that the power band in these engines would be quite narrow.
Absolutely. Quite awkward to drive, and it takes people who come to this class a little while to adjust, and Jeff Brabham went through that last year. Incidentally, he's now behind Stephen Richards, so Stephen Richards up to 4th. That's a very good drive.
Jones, Murphy, Audi A4 Quattros, dominating here at Amaroo Park. But let's watch the battle too, further back, between Stephen Richards and Jeffrey Brabham. As Jones comes up to take the second last corner of this 31-lap race.
One corner to go for Brad Jones. He's going to make it a double for today in the opening round of the championship. Greg Murphy tucked in behind. It'll be half a car length at the end. It's the Oryx Audis 1 and 2. Flashing through there in third place is Paul Morris. And it's really on for fourth and fifth as they come up onto the straight, because I can see that Richards and Brabham are having a big go, and Brabham's got him back in fourth place. Great stuff, Jeffrey Brabham and Stephen Richards.
So Brad Jones wins round 1 of the BOC Gases Australian Super Touring Championship from Greg Murphy, Paul Morris, Jeffrey Brabham, Stephen Richards, Cameron McLean, Charlie O'Brien and Justin Matthews. Now in the Drivers' Championship, of course, Jones now dominates from Murphy, Morris, Jeffrey Brabham and Stephen Richards.
And in the Manufacturers' Championship points table, Audi leads with 30 points, 6 clear of BMW, 14 clear of Volvo in third place. In the Teams' Championship points, Oryx Audi Sport Australia with 54, well clear of Diet Coke BMW, Faber-Castell Racing third from Triple P, and Foxtel yet to score.
Stephen Richards dominating the Network 10 Privateers Cup with 30 points from Charlie O'Brien 22, Justin Matthews 16 and Cameron McLean 12. Round 2 of the Australian Super Touring Championship coming up at Lakeside on June 23. It's BMW's home turf, Neil. Will that make a difference?
I think it will, Craig, and let's not forget last year the battle between Audi and BMW at Lakeside. It was absolutely fantastic. BMW do all their testing up there. I think they'll be strong. And let's not forget Volvo. They're doing a heap of testing between now and when we go to Lakeside, so I'll be looking forward to Peter Brock's performance.
We hope you've enjoyed our coverage from Amaroo Park here on Network 10.